Inside, ADX Florence, America's toughest prison. Intro, hook under 100 words. When Alcatraz shut down in 1963, America promised it would never build another place like it. But decades later, the crimes grew darker and the inmates more dangerous. So the government did the unthinkable. It built a new rock. Hidden in the mountains of Colorado, surrounded by razor wire, sniper towers, and silence, stands the prison that replaced Alcatraz. This is ADX Florence, the place where the most dangerous men in America are locked inside their own minds. The birth of a new rock. When the gates of Alcatraz closed for the last time, many believed America's age of fortress prisons was over. The island was decaying, its costs rising, and public opinion had turned against the idea of escape-proof hellholes. But by the 1980s, a new wave of crime was sweeping across the country, one that even high-security prisons couldn't contain. The federal system was losing control. The chaos years, between 1983 and 1992, violence inside federal prisons reached levels unseen since the days of Alcatraz. Supermax inmates, mob bosses, gang leaders, terrorists, were using the system against itself. They bribed guards, coordinated riots, and ran criminal networks from inside their cells using coded mail and smuggled phones. The most alarming case came in October 1983 at USP Marion, Illinois, the nation's most secure prison at the time. Two guards, Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman, were brutally murdered by inmates Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, both members of the Aryan Brotherhood. The killings were so meticulously planned, so silent and sudden, that Marion was instantly thrown into permanent lockdown. Every inmate was confined to their cell 23 hours a day, indefinitely. That lockdown became the prototype for a new idea: control units. If Alcatraz had been built to stop physics, escape, these new prisons would stop mental escape. Planning the Supermax. By 1989, the Bureau of Prisons began sketching a design for a facility that would make Alcatraz look almost humane by comparison. The mission: to house the worst of the worst, men too dangerous for even maximum security prisons. The proposed site: a remote stretch of high desert in southern Colorado, near the small town of Florence, population barely 3,000. The location was chosen for 3 reasons. Isolation, surrounded by mountains and open plains, miles from any major city. Visibility, wide, flat terrain ideal for surveillance. Symbolism, it would be the modern fortress of the American justice system. In 1994, construction began on what officials quietly called the ADX, short for Administrative Maximum Facility. Locals nicknamed it Alcatraz of the Rockies. Designing a mind prison. Unlike Alcatraz, ADX wasn't built for water or rock. It was built for psychological control. Every inch of the prison was engineered to remove freedom, sight, and even human sound. Cells are 7 by 12 feet, made of poured concrete, including the bed, desk, and stool. There are no bars, only solid steel doors with a narrow slot for food. Each cell has a slit-like window, measuring just 4 inches wide and angled upward, showing only the sky. Prisoners can't see the mountains, the fences, or even each other. The architects described it as a design to minimize sensory stimulation. Inmate lawyers called it a box designed to bury a man alive. Every prisoner lives on a strict routine. Lights on at 5 o'clock a.m., meals slid through the slot, no human contact, no physical touch. Even the showers are automatic, controlled by a timer outside the cell. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. The remaining hour is spent in a small, fenced concrete cage known as the dog run. That's it. No yards, no phone calls, no contact visits. ADX was not designed for rehabilitation. It was designed for containment, and for some, erasure. Population of the damned. When ADX opened in 1994, its first residents were the men the government had run out of places to send. Terrorists, spies, serial killers, gang leaders, and cartel bosses, all under one roof, but never in the same room. Among its earliest inmates were names that had become nightmares in the American psyche: the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski; Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker of 9/11; Richard Reed, the shoe bomber; Ramzi Youssef, mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing; and Thomas Silverstein, the man whose crime in Marion had started it all. Silverstein would die there in 2019 after spending 36 years in solitary confinement, the longest in U.S. history. His name still echoes through the concrete halls as a grim reminder of why ADX exists. A fortress of silence. From above, ADX Florence looks like a geometric scar in the desert, perfect symmetry, surrounded by multiple layers of razor wire and motion sensors. The inner compound is divided into units, each more restrictive than the last. Range 13, the deepest isolation block for the most uncontrollable inmates. H Unit, for terrorist offenders. Control Unit, where prisoners serve years without a single word exchanged. Guards move silently, using mirrored hallways and remotely operated doors. Even within the staff, many don't know who's kept where. If Alcatraz was a fortress of water and rock, ADX Florence is a fortress of concrete and silence. Legacy of Alcatraz. Ironically, when FBI Director William Sessions toured ADX before its opening, he called it the modern reflection of the rock. But there's one crucial difference. Inmates at Alcatraz could at least see the city lights of San Francisco, a reminder that life existed beyond the bars. In Florence, all they see is the sky. ADX. Florence isn't about breaking bodies. It's about breaking time, memory, and hope, turning men into ghosts long before they die. And for the FBI, it was more than a prison. It was a message that the era of Alcatraz had ended, but its philosophy lived on. Voices from the box. Life inside the clean version of hell. When you ask former guards about ADX Florence, they all say the same thing. It's quiet. Too quiet. That's not peace. That's pressure. Every hallway hums with the sound of ventilation, buzzing lights, and the faint clatter of steel doors opening somewhere you can't see. The silence is part of the punishment. Because here, silence isn't calm. It's control. The routine that breaks time. Inside ADX, every day is identical. A buzzer at 5 o'clock a.m. Breakfast through a slot. Head count at 6:30. Exercise alone in a cage. Lunch, shower, lock-in. Lights out at 10. No clocks, no mirrors, no contact. Days dissolve into one another until even the guards lose track. One officer described it perfectly. It's like working in a submarine buried under a mountain. Prisoners call it the box. Guards call it the concrete ocean. Letters from isolation. Few words have ever escaped those walls, but a handful of inmate letters leaked to reporters and lawyers over the years. They describe ADX not as a prison, but as a mental furnace. One handwritten letter from Thomas Silverstein read, "The walls talk to me now. When you spend decades alone, your brain starts creating people just so it has someone to argue with." Another from an inmate in the H unit said, "We live like ghosts, unseen, unheard, untouched. You start to wonder if you're still real." Some inmates folded paper airplanes and slid them under their doors, hoping another cell down the range would catch one. Most never did. Guards of the void. But it's not only the prisoners who unravel. Many ADX correctional officers quit within months. They describe the job as a mixture of monotony and dread, a place where you never see danger, but always feel it watching. A former officer named Michael Higgins told investigators, "You can't talk to them, can't look them in the eye, can't even hand them food. You start to feel like part of the machinery, not a human being." Some guards admitted they developed insomnia, anxiety, or even paranoia. Because ADX doesn't just contain evil, it absorbs it. The psychological experiment. Psychiatrists who studied long-term solitary confinement call ADX a slow-motion neurological collapse. Brain scans of former inmates show reduced activity in the regions controlling emotion and impulse. The longer they stay, the harder it becomes to reintegrate anywhere, even another prison. That's why many who leave ADX end up back in isolation elsewhere. One psychologist summarized it simply. ADX doesn't fix dangerous men. It perfects them. Notable inmates, living shadows. Each name inside those walls represents a different face of American violence. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. His final years spent in total silence before his suicide in 2023. Ramzi Youssef, 1993. World Trade Center bomber, blindfolded whenever moved, living in sensory blackout. Zacharias Moussaoui, the 9/11 conspirator, forbidden contact even with other terrorists. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, 22 hours a day staring at a concrete wall. Even among monsters, hierarchy exists, whispered through vents, tapped on walls, coded in coughs. The gangs that ruled Marion and Leavenworth still breathe here, but only in fragments of sound. The cost of containment, the Bureau of Prisons calls ADX a necessary deterrent. Human rights groups call it a clean version of hell. In 2015, the Europe and Court of Human Rights debated whether sending suspects to ADX violated humanitarian law. Their reason? Extreme isolation beyond human endurance. Yet the United States continues to defend it, arguing that some men are too violent, too radical, too irredeemable to exist anywhere else. The ghosts that remain, every few years, reporters are allowed a brief, guided tour. They walk through spotless corridors, past automated doors, and cells where inmates never look up. The air smells of disinfectant and dust. When one journalist asked a warden, "Do you ever worry that this place breaks people?" The warden paused, then said, "That's the point. The legacy of silence." From Alcatraz to Florence, America has always built monuments to its fears. Where the old rock used tides and stone to isolate men, ADX uses science and silence. It's the place where the concept of punishment crossed the line into psychological engineering. And yet, behind those walls, the same question echoes that haunted Alcatraz. If you lock a man away from the world long enough, does he stop being dangerous? Or just stop being human?